All right, welcome to chapter 22, the Renaissance and Mannerism in Cinquecento Italy, or the 16th century Italy. We're not going to be only staying in Italy. We are going to be looking at some precursors to moving into Northern Europe as well with this idea of Mannerism. But essentially, we are looking at the High Renaissance. We're going to be looking at a very kind of it's really a short period of time. It lasts only about 2 decades or so, the High Renaissance, when it reaches its height. So, the Renaissance, we have like 1495 to 1520, but then this later Renaissance kind of into Mannerism, about 1520 to 1600. So again, it's a relatively short amount of time, but the things that we've looked at already, the rise of the Renaissance in Italy, and what we're going to be looking at and discussing today, we're going to see the rise of these artists to the fame as being something that is international. The height of the fame, and as a matter of fact, we're going to look at people like Vasari, who at the height of their fame wrote a biography of all the greatest artists of the time. The book was called The Lives of the Most Famous Painters, Sculptors, and Architects. So fame, but we are now reaching the status of like mega superstar artists. We're going to take a look at people like Raphael, and some of these people will attain and have achieved such fame and stardom in their lifetime, that is really the height of what Mannerism is. Remember, because Mannerism is the perfection of man, and our one's moral and ethical obligation to be the best version of yourself that you can be. So we're going to take a look at a couple different styles. We're definitely going to be in this the Florence area still. We're going to start in this Florentinian style, which is kind of careful designs and drawings and kind of more of what we've been looking at. And then we're going to go north in Italy to Venice and kind of look at the Venetian styles that they were playing with around the same time. So again, this idea that fame equals morality and that fame is the sign of one's moral character. So keep that in mind. Another thing to keep kind of in mind is that we are still looking that nature is God's greatest art. So we're still looking to God as the model. Though we're going to see the shift slightly into this idea that, humanism. It's no longer about God's model. It's the artistic decisions that are most important thing. I am the model. If God made me, or if God made humans in His image, and artists were given this gift of the divine, then I'm the model, and my artistic decisions therefore trump everything else. And we're going to see this shift from this moral imperative in artwork to this aspiring to beauty, right, and the aesthetic over a strict adherence to the realism that painting was thought to be or supposed to be. We're going to see individual expressions triumph over nature. And then we're going to see the shift in a focus again from Florence to Rome, and mostly from this political and economical kind of standpoint. We're going to see there's a reason for this, is because during this time there was a string of very powerful popes that really because Rome had been left to such ruin for so long, they really, starting with like Pope Leo X, and Julius II, I guess, and then Leo X is his successor. But that they're trying to bring Rome back to the greatness of what it was in the past, and really they're thinking about, because after the Great Schism, after the two church or the two popes sitting in Rome and then in Avignon that we talked about, right, we're trying to now make a cohesive church because it's splintered and it is fractioned, and they are trying to bring it back to its former glory with really kind of an empire in mind. Again, Julius II and Pope Leo X have this new Roman Empire kind of mindset. We're going to see the artist considered to be genius here. Right, and again, these superstardom fames. We're going to take a look at some of the Florentinian artists, Leonardo da Vinci, the superb master of line, this idea of this pioneering sfumato that we will look at. He's an inventor, naturalist, and just probably one of history's most famous people. We're going to look at Raphael, master painter who incorporated elements of both Leonardo and a contemporary Michelangelo. Again, then we'll take a look at Michelangelo, the master sculptor, of course, and an excellent painter and architect. And his people, like Michelangelo, his name was in demand. And then people like Bramante, an architect who favored this idea of classical building kind of rejuvenation and this central plan design that we'll take a look at. But, all right, not to negate the Venetian artists Bellini, Giorgiano, Titian, and Palladio that we'll take a look at. So let's take a look at our second Ninja Turtle. If you remember from the last chapter, we looked at Donatello. We are going to look at the other three today. Leonardo da Vinci, 1452, 1519. He was born in a town of Vinci. That's where he gets his name, Leonardo da Vinci. It's just a very small village, to a single mother. And though his mother was not married to his father, Piero, his father still supported him. He saw his genius at a young age and provided, took care of them, and he and his mother, and then provided funds for Leonardo to be educated. And he sent him off, studied under Verrocchio. Now we've seen Verrocchio, if that name sounds familiar. Verrocchio was one of the sculptors of the Davids that we looked at with Donatello. Verrocchio was if we look back at the last chapter, the slide of the David on the right, where he is he's not the child, he's like an adolescent or a young adult, more mature, rather than standing on David's head and sticking him with his sword like Donatello shows. So that Verrocchio, he sent a 14-year-old Leonardo to study in Florence with Verrocchio. Now, and when he's 29, he applies to be the court artist for the Duke of Milan, Ludovico Sforza. And Sforza was a condottiere. He was one of those military leader for hires. And we know this because we have Leonardo's job application, basically, where he in his application for the court artist, he lists all the things that he can do, such as engineering weapons, creating better fortifications for the military base. He says he's an architect, that he's a master military engineer. And this is really funny. At the very bottom of his application, he says, and I can also paint and draw a little. So apparently needs to work on his confidence. That's really, really funny to me. And then let's see. He ping pongs around, serves under Cassier Borgia as an engineer. He returns to Florence, and he kind of ping-pongs, goes back to Milan. He heads back to Florence, and then he lives in Rome for a while, where he serves under Francois, the King of France. And then he dies in 1519. Now, the interesting thing, he really only created a handful of paintings, maybe 12, 13. He was extremely meticulous, and he was a perfectionist. And we know that he didn't complete much because he left an ample amount of manuscripts that were filled with drawings and ideas and sketches and concepts and things that just he never completed. He famously wrote backwards, right? Wanted to keep all of his ideas out of the radar of the Roman Catholic Church. And it was also about like the smudging of the ink. And just as a kind of an idea of where we find Leonardo's mindset, if we look to the right, the idea of the Vitruvian man, this is, and if that name sounds familiar to you, Vitruvian is, we looked at Vitruvius, the Roman architect and the theorist, who was writing about sacred geometry. And here, again, he's a very much a humanist individual. He's taken in by this concept of humanism. And the idea here is, looking at sacred geometry, that the circle is the heavenly realm and the square is the earthly realm. So kind of the idea that Leonardo is looking to the Vitruvian man here as kind of the perfectionist. This is the ultimate humanist reflection of man. He's a perfect, or he's perfection in both realms, both in the spiritual realm and in the earthly realm. So he is different, though. He is a humanist, and although humanist, right, we are starting to have, we have this idea of moral imperative, moral kind of obligation to be the perfect person. The statue of the David, again from Donatello, is the from. Right, the David is the perfect contemplation. Actually, we'll look at that in a little bit. I'm going to be referencing the David statue from Michelangelo, as well as being this perfect humanist form. But he's different in a way because he sketches, he uses these things, but he's starting to pull away. He is starting to not replicate nature. There's some things about Leonardo that will fascinate you when we get into this a little bit. But here is a picture of, on the right is Da Vinci's Madonna on the Rocks from the San Francesco Grande. It's in Milan. He is painting with oil paints, but it's still on wood. We haven't moved to canvas yet. He is starting to paint, and we're going to start seeing these things in these geometrical forms. We started seeing this already in the Renaissance, but he is putting things in a very geometric kind of compositional things, where triangles just look good. He is not necessarily adhering to reality, right? He's not trying to replicate nature, because if you look at this, how many times do you walk in and people are sitting this way to each other? We're going to start to see some of these things, the awkward positions, the way that the human form is moving doesn't quite add up, and we're going to see kind of a birth of this where we start to see far more realistic adaptations of the human figure and form and movement, because that's what we were studying in humanism, moving into this Mannerism where we are starting to, again, appeal to the artist's kind of discretion over reality. Although, these have strong, or this particular painting has a strong compositional arrangement, it is meant to be in a kind of these forms to bring kind of the central focal point to the center, to the Madonna. It has a balance, it has a harmony, but it's definitely an artistic vision over nature, because some of these things are, again, not natural poses, not natural positions. It's awkward. It looks kind of humorous, but at the same time, there's a distinct harmony to it that makes us feel that it looks proper, even though it is probably not natural. So we also see his idea of kind of this pictorial vision of, right, this artist's idea. And we can see this pictorial. When I say pictorial, it means more of like, it's like a artistic license. And why I say that, look at the background. Look at the bizarre background. This is not a biblical scene, even though we're looking at the Madonna and the baby, Jesus and John the Baptist. We are not seeing a biblical scene in the background. It's a very bizarre, alien-looking thing with all these craggly rocks and I'm not really sure. You're not really sure what you're looking at. Is it leaves? Is it trees? Are they stalagmites, stalactites? It seems like it's in a cave or cavern. It's just like the very alien-esque looking kind of terrain. But it looks pleasing, and I think that's what he's going for. I think that's what we're looking for, is that the fact that art is artifice. Art is artificial. So we're not trying to paint reality. We're just trying to paint something that looks pleasing. And if we look here at the Last Supper, this is probably a painting that everyone is familiar with. The fact here that, again, this is oil and tempera paint on plaster. So this is that fresco style that we are talking about. Some of the things in particular about the Last Supper, a lot of these he's experimenting, and a lot of it just didn't work. He was playing with this mix between oil and tempera paint, and playing on the idea of the different types of dry plaster, wet plaster, and quite frankly, a lot of it started flaking off. And we have had restoration, very controversial restoration attempts at this to save it. But if we hadn't, or if we didn't, then this work of art would have been completely lost. So again, we're still looking at this triangular composition, right? Jesus is in a triangle, but we see kind of this form here. We see a triangle form. We see another triangle form, this triad, right? We see the vanishing points, again, coming through, all leading us down to looking at Jesus. We see the background kind of focused and having this the haze and the atmospheric perspective. But this is also very awkward. This is a very unsettling painting. Everybody's on. How many times have you ever walked into somebody's house for a dinner and everybody's sitting on one side of the table? It is very unnatural. It's a very odd way of composing things. No one eats like this. You don't sit all at one side. But again, it looked pleasing. It wasn't about the thing itself. It wasn't about what was going on. It was just because it looked good. And it was the artistic decision in the composition rather than having it being a more of a realistic kind of approach, right, with the group of apostles and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at probably one of his most famous works. This is the Mona Lisa. This is an image of Lisa de Antonio Maria Gherardi, or Gherardini, excuse me. She was the wife of an extremely wealthy Italian merchant, Francesco del Giocondo, and this painting is of his wife. It is in a traditional kind of three-quarter view. We have a triangular composition, and we have this weird alien fantastical kind of background. We don't really know where it is or what it's supposed to be. But what we see here, and we will actually see it if we move back in all of his works, we see something that is called sfumato, and sfumato literally just translates to smoky. But it's in all of his works. It's basically this dark, smoky, hazy-like quality that he writes about, that he likes and enjoys on all of his work, because it gives it kind of a soft edge and a warm glow. And this is just him expressing himself. He wants things to look sensuous and soft and beautiful. And in order to achieve that, it has to have the sfumato, or this kind of otherworldly quality to it. So about this is just, this was not, people herald the Mona Lisa as probably one of the most recognizable artworks in the world, and that is true. And it never used to be. He took it with him when he ping-ponged around Italy. He took the painting to France in 1526 with him. It was in Napoleon's bathroom for centuries. It just kind of hung around. It didn't. It didn't. 1516. I'm sorry, 1526. He did not take it to France. He would have been dead. That was it. That's a typo. 1516. Oops. Sorry about that, folks. I looked at that and I was like, that's not right. But essentially, though, this painting was in the bathroom. It just kind of hung around for centuries. Nobody really cared about it. It's not all that big if you look at it. It's only 2 feet by 2 feet-ish, 2.5 feet by 2 feet. It's not very big. However, everything changed when Vincenzo Perugia, he was an Italian nationalist, stole it from the Louvre. And he was a nationalist, and he said that Leonardo's masterwork should not be in France, and he tried to return it, wanted to return it to Italy. And he kept it kind of like underneath, kind of the radar for a couple of years until he tried to sell it, of course, and then he got caught. But in the 2 years between 1911 and 1914, when it was stolen until it was returned, it exploded. There were songs written about it. There was poetry written about it. There were declarations and manifestos and all of these writings about how this was the greatest masterwork of all time, and now is lost to the annals of history, la da 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 da. And then it was returned, but it wasn't just returned as the Mona Lisa. It was now the Mona Lisa. And it is not that impressive of a work. It really, really isn't. You will wait in line for hours to get a glimpse of it from a 15-foot distance, and it's just not that great of a work, but nevertheless, You can see Leonardo da Vinci's style all over this, and the key takeaway is this sfumato technique. But he wasn't just a painter. He drew almost everything. And again, going back to this Madonna with the child, for the sketch for the Madonna on the Rocks, right? He sketched everything. He drew everything. And this is, again, this international fame, right? It follows him and precedes Leonardo wherever he goes. Now, he's not was just an architect or a military engineer. He studied human anatomy, and this is how famous it was. It is illegal, it still is, FYI, to dig up dead bodies and operate on them because it is considered to be desecration. Rightfully so. However, during Leonardo's time, they just kind of turned a blind eye because he was the Leonardo da Vinci. And he was able to go into graves and cemeteries, dig up bodies, and dissect them to draw and study them. And this is the first anatomical accurate drawing of a fetus in utero that we have. And he drew this from life. He drew, this is from a deceased woman that had a baby in utero. And this is exactly what he did. So he's drawing and sketching and taking meticulous notes on all of these aspects. Right? Because he thought, so even though he's a humanist artist and he's still making designs, he still thinks God is the model. Because ultimately God is to know how to, is if you ask Leonardo why he did it, in his writings he said, the reason why he did all of these things was to become a better painter, because he still believes that God is the model. And to understand how to be a good painter, how to paint life, and how to paint reality, we have to know how the skeletal system works. We have to know the muscle structures. We have to know how these things move within the body so that we can accurately reflect and capture that within painting. So he has this superstardom where he can just about do anything he wants. And this brings up to a point I want to talk about. This concept. We're going to look at two different types of concepts. The first one is called disegno, Disegno, disegno. So these are kind of ideologies, but it's the physical. Disegno is, it means design, but it's more about drawing. It's about, disegno is a concept. It's a philosophical understanding. It's the physical manifestation of an intellectual concept, right? Like the intellectual component of the visual arts, which, I don't know, justifies their elevation from craft to fine art. And I guess that idea, disegno, would be on par with like humanities, the great literature and music of the time and of the era. That if art is intellectually stimulating, it is morally stimulating, it is something that shows the perfection of humanity in this humanistic way, then that is what art is, right? It's this, again, this intellectual component. It's the physical manifestation of that intellectual perfection that humanist thought is trying to instill. And with that, artists are special. Artists have a higher purpose. One disegno and art needs, or disegno within art, or art that is a disegno style, has a moral imperative. It's to influence and inspire and to intellectually challenge the person to be the best versions of they can. And as a matter of fact, Federico Zuccari, he was the head of the Academy of St. Luke's, remember the Guild of the Artists? His idea of disegno, or his kind of philosophies, are their art and drawing and so on and so forth, is the external manifestation of the internal intellectual, meaning it isn't God. This is that idea of like to find the human as center. I am the center of the world. Not that God isn't important to me, but to find truth in God's nature, I need to look inside myself. And this is where we start to, again, still see these pulling aparts of the idea that the artistic kind of inspiration over nature is going to start creeping in to what we're looking at. So let's take a look at another Ninja Turtle. The third Ninja Turtle, the red Ninja Turtle. This is Raphael. We commonly just call him Raphael. Raffaello Sanzo de Urbino, or Raffaello Santi Sanzeno de Urbino. But again, commonly just Raphael. Raphael was a son of a painter. His family was artists. His brothers were artists. He was very probably one of the most well-known of the time when he gets going. One of the most well-known painters who lives and dies like a rock star, quite literally, in some of the accounts. So he was trained in Umbria by Perugino, and if that name sounds familiar, he is the artist that we looked at who painted Christ delivering the keys to the kingdom to St. Peter. When we look at, and this looks familiar, that is that reference. We'll look at this in a minute. He was very much of high society. If around 1504 to 1508, he studied in Florence. And he became, well, as a young man, he moves to Rome, where he sees the work of Bramante, and he was absolutely blown away by his work. He is revered as an artist. He is famous for his paintings of the Madonna and the Child. Again, the young master moves to Rome, where he is completely enthralled by the work of Bramante, but he also absorbs elements of the work that his contemporaries, Leonardo and Michelangelo, and he takes those, because these are people who Michelangelo he admires and doesn't take his style, but definitely creates his own, understands that he needs, in order to make a lasting impact, he needs to create his own styles. So Raphael, because of his fame, right? He was one of the most famous artists living in Rome. He had the adoration of the Vatican. The Vatican paid for his apartment, a very lush, lavish apartment. The Vatican paid for. And he lived well. He was liked and loved by all, and he was a revered artist. And because of that, he was able to essentially open up his own school. It wasn't a guild per se, but it was definitely in his workshop. And we will look at this later on in the semester, in the chapters. We'll look at Raphael's workshop, or the students that come out of his workshop, rather. But they are known as the Raphaelites. These are the little Raphaels, the student of Raphael's. There are about 50 apprentices in his school at any given time, or in his workshop. And oftentimes, Although Raphael would, much like a guild, would teach people to paint. He would teach them to paint in his style, and oftentimes his workshop, the students or the people in his workshop, his apprentices would be painting, and he would come in and sign his name on their work. So we now understand that there's some paintings that, can we attribute them solely to Raphael, or are they mostly Raphael with his Raphaelites, again, these students who are apprenticing under him? And remember, when we were looking at guilds, that imitation is the first step in art school, imitating the artist styles whom you are influenced by, and then emulation, right, is the second stage in that, when you start taking their work and incorporating it into a body of work that is distinctly and kind of uniquely stylistically your own. So, okay, he was a very young man. He was extremely popular, and by all accounts, he was extremely handsome, and was very much the ladies' man. He was never married, although he was engaged at one point, but she ended up dying, so that never came through, or that never went through. There, like I said, he lived and died like a rock star. These are some famous stories of his last kind of few weeks of his life, as told by his contemporaries, that he wasn't feeling well, and more than likely he died of something of a heart-related issue. We don't really know, but the story goes that Raphael's longtime girlfriend, no, not the woman that he was engaged to, were, let's see, how do I say it? Engaged in a 2-week-long lovemaking session. And she said that Raphael died of a heart attack from too much physical exertion. Live like a rock star, die like a rock star, I suppose. But I digress. To give you an insight as to how famous Raphael was, when he did die in his early 30s, he was buried in the Pantheon, of all places. Now, the Pantheon is one of the most revered buildings of the Renaissance architects. Right, the Pantheon is reserved for the burial place of kings and popes and great rulers of the world throughout history. And there are somebody like a famous artist who gets to be buried amongst kings and popes. That shows how influential and how powerful and how famous he was. He worked with all of the famous and worked for all of the famous and wealthy families in the area, regardless of living in the apartment supplied by the Vatican. Again, here, let's take a look at this, kind of a turn or a take off of Perugino's, again, the Christ delivering the keys to the kingdom to St. Peter. This is the marriage of the Virgin. So we'll see that much in the same styles. It has a central plan building in the background, the central plan architecture. The grouping of the people, the tile of like this mosaic-like floor, but all of these orthogonals and these sight lines, right, into a single vanishing point. It's very regular, it's very precise, it's very elegant. There is a triangular compositional element to it, right? Because remember, Leonardo is, and Disegno is what is happening right now. So he is very much aware of this. So these triangular compositions, the way that these are grouped and these are grouped, reminiscent of the Last Supper. The colors that Raphael uses are crisp and super saturated. They're very vibrant and vivid. So we're going to see these things. There's still kind of there's not much of a sfumato on this necessarily, but we definitely see chiaroscuro, we see some modeling, we see definition, we see shading, and again, all of these types of central planned architectural buildings, which is slightly different actually when we start looking into it, into this chapter. We're going to start seeing that central planned the central plan architectural structures are deviating from the high Renaissance from this into this later Renaissance Mannerism. Let's take a look at, again, this is one of, these are what Raphael is most famous for, the Madonna in the Meadow. And again, we've talked about this before, but just so you know, Madonna is a title. It just means my lady. It is not a name. This was painted upon his Raphael's arrival in Florence. It is of course, the Virgin Mary, Christ, and John the Baptist. And it has, again, that pyramidal composition. If you look at the drawings, much like Da Vinci was doing at the time, these cartoons or these simple line drawings would then be transferred to a canvas, or in this case, wood. We still have yet to move to canvas proper, or that's not the normal thing right now. It's still very much wood, which gives us this darker tone. This is why we don't have as much in this super saturated vibrancy that we're going to see in some of these later paintings, later works. So, kind of keep an eye out for his use of chiaroscuro and the idea of value. He's a master at this, because looking at the Lady Madonna, she does have this solidarity of form, and we see all of the other cues and telltale signs of the Renaissance painting, of the atmospheric perspective, and so on and so forth. Now, although Raphael is most famously remembered for his Madonna and the Child series, this is the one that I'm going to focus on quite a bit, that I think is probably one of his most famous, or the ones that I would focus on. And in order to do that, we kind of need to talk about Pope Julius II. So this painting, this fresco, is called Philosophy, but we kind of just commonly call it the School of Athens. And this is in the Stanza della Signatura in the Vatican City. This is the signature room. Is where all of the important documents were signed, all the important decisions were made, all the important guests were met. The signatura is like the common room. This is an important place, and within the Vatican. And there are. This is one of four. The Room of Signatures has one of four frescoes on the wall, and each wall is kind of the branches of human, or like they're paintings about the branches of human knowledge: theology, law, poetry, and philosophy. And of course, these are frescoes because remember, ancient Roman artistic styles were frescoes. So of course, calling back from this into this humanist standpoint, Raphael's going to, of course, paint with fresco. Again, that idea of pigment in wet plaster. Okay, so let's talk about the Vatican for a second. Let's step aside. We're going to focus on Giuliano della Rovera, who becomes Pope, and he names himself Pope Julius II, and he names himself Julius after Julius Caesar of ancient Rome. He names himself Julius Caesar. Let that sink in for a second. He's a pope. This is a humanist pope. A humanist pope who is not putting God first. He's not a traditional Christian name pope like Pope Francis or Pope Clement or Pius. These are not Christian ideologies or Christian names. This is along the lines of Augustus, right? And Julius Caesar. He is an extremely influential pope. He is a warrior pope through his conquests and the spoils of war. He is able to fund this massive overhaul of Rome because he wants to bring Rome back to its former glory. Again, like the empire of these ancient Greco-Roman empires that they so longly read about and strive for. So through these things, through these wars and kind of warring city-states, he's able to fund projects like the Sistine Chapel, the St. Peter's Basilica. He has these massive building projects underway, and he's raising money to rebuild them through the spoils of war. He is stuffing all of the Vatican or the church coffers, the banks, with all of the spoils of war. So this is an interesting pope, right? Because he is so humanist. Now, another thing, this is the head of the Catholic Church, the head of the Catholic faith, right? And we are looking at philosophy. And that's what one of these branches are. Again, theology, law, philosophy, and poetry are the four branches of human knowledge that are hanging within the stanza della signatura, the room of signatures. Now, okay, so this is kind of a who's who of ancient classical Greco-Roman thinkers and philosophers. It's an interesting. So this particular painting is set in Athens, Greece, but it's painted in a Roman style with these barrel vaults and barrel arches. So there's a blending of this idea of ancient Greece, and because it's the school of Athens, Greece, right? But it's painted in a Roman style, so there's this blending there. And all of the people in this painting actually, like I said, it's a who's who. It spans about 800 years of a time frame of thinkers. And when we look at it, and if you want to Google this on your own and look at all of these people that are in here, it is really, really cool. And there are so many things going on in this painting. And the amazing amount of detail that are in the paintings, or in these frescoes are quite stunning and mind-blowing in and of itself. But let's just look at this real quick. Flanked here on the left, we have the god of the arts, Apollo. And then on the right side of the screen, we see this is a statue or painting of a statue of Athena, who is the goddess of wisdom. So this is why we can appropriately say that, the school and philosophy, art, education, like that's what this painting is in reference to. And we see that the orthogonals, or these vanishing point lines, are all coming down and focusing on these two central characters, these two central themes. Now let's look at this. On the left, we see this is Plato. And Plato is pointing to the sky. He points up. And this is in reference to his Platonic theory, right, of perfect forms, these forms and concepts that kind of exist in the ether outside of the material world, right? So, and these are on the left side of the screen. Let's call this Team Plato. So these are all the types of thinkers who are kind of in this Platonic thought, again, within the 700 to 800 year kind of time span. And then we see on the right, we see Aristotle, and he has his hand kind of out referencing to the ground. And this is because he's an empiricist, right? He's an observational theorist. He points down to the earth because he is kind of like the equation of or just everything is an observational fact on Earth. He's very humanist this way. And everything on the right side of your screen is kind of like this team Aristotle or Aristotelian thought. Some cool things about this painting. We see that he uses, this is Raphael, right? So he's using contemporary people. This is Leonardo da Vinci's likeness, face, in the idea of Plato. Because, like Plato, perfect forms is what kind of embodies, or what Leonardo da Vinci embodies. And there are other contemporaries, and again, you can Google this, and there's, they have extensive lists of all of these people in here. But down here in this Pythagoras, he is using the face of Michelangelo. The likeness of Michelangelo here for Pythagorean or Pythagoras. And then we see right over here on the far, go back, he is right here. And this is zoomed in, he's here next to Zoroaster. There's Raphael himself. Now, what I should say about this, or what I need to say about this, is that there are no Christian references to this. But yet this is hanging in the Vatican. Okay, so what Raphael is trying to say is that he's equating these great new Renaissance artists with the great minds of classical past and antiquity. He is making a reference to them and saying that these are our contemporaries and they are just as great, if not greater, than the minds of the past who we try to study and emulate. But this has nothing to do with God or any biblical understanding or context. And that's not to say that the other three don't, because they definitely do. It just happens to be that this one does not. And I find that to be the most fascinating aspect about this, is that there is no religious or biblical context or any reference within this particular work of art. So, but yet it hangs in the most important room of the Vatican. Let's take a look at another painting from Raphael. So this was made for the palace at the Agostino Chigi, the Vatican banker at the time. And this was inspired by a poem from Greek mythology. Here, Galatea, the goddess, falls in love with Isis, the shepherd boy, and runs away with, this is the Greek story, right? And runs away with a shepherd boy. And her jealous husband, the Cyclops, Polyphemus, chases after her, kills Isis, and by throwing a pillar at him and crushing his body. And this is the story of Polyphemus reclaiming his bride. It's very romantic. It's full of lore and adventure. It's beauty. It has its beautiful forms. The full forms that he's playing with the chiaroscuro, the solidarity. It's semi-erotic. We see naked forms coming in. We're going to start seeing a lot more nudity also as well. Not necessarily in this erotic form or like in a pornographic way, but erotic meaning exotic, meaning sensual, meaning it's special. It has a certain sumptuousness to it, that luxuriousness or lavish lushness to it, that we're going to start using and incorporating these words like exotic and erotic into our kind of vernacular. So, okay, a couple things. On the left, we're looking at Pope Julius II. Now, Pope Julius II. This ping pongs around a little bit, and we're going to look at a few works commissioned by Pope Julius II. And then we're also going to look at this fella here on the left, Pope Leo X. Leo X is the second son of Lorenzo de' Medici, right? And we know the Medicis. This is this powerful trade and banking family, right, in Florence. And I told you before that the Medicis are going to become even more famous, and they're going to have popes. Well, this is one of them. Giovanni di Lorenzo de' Medici changes his name to Pope Leo X. He was not the best pope, maybe he was a bad pope, I don't know. He spent and borrowed all sorts of money that Pope Julius had used to stuff his coffers with through war. He spent freely, made lavish improvements and commissions by the church, or on behalf of the church, I guess I should say, and rebuilding Rome and fulfilling Pope Julius II's vision of Rome. Okay, so why Pope Leo X, though, for all of his good things that he did for art, he is, though most notably remembered for his indulgences. And this, the indulgences, if you remember, were kind of well, he's using the money, right, for donations to build St. Peter's Basilica. And these indulgences are one of the key points in Martin Luther's 95 Theses that spark the Protestant Reformation that we're coming to. Right, again, Protestant meaning Protestant. They protested against the Catholic Church because of Pope Leo X's indulgences. Indulgences were these ideas of buying your way out of sin, buying your way out of purgatory, and all of those monies that Pope Leo X was taking in would go in to fund his art commissions processes, or projects, rather. And then on the right, I have a picture that Raphael painted, or a painting, rather, a portrait of Baldassare Castiglione. So Castiglione was, he's famous for writing it's called the Book of the Courtier. And it was for men and women, but the Courtier is essentially the book of the court. And he wrote a guidebook on how men and women, but men, should act in court. This could be king's court, a papal court, or a ducal court. It really doesn't matter, but it's basically how to behave in a high society, right? It's kind of like like a men's fashion blog of the day, right? It had things that about etiquette, about culture, except for example, how to be moral, to be proper. One had to dress well. They had to understand high fashion, but in order to you didn't want to dress too flashy or too fancy. You just wanted to dress tastefully, elegant. Another thing was to be aware of the news, knowing the latest news, knowing how to read, of course, would help. But knowing the latest news, learning how to dance, knowing how to entertain, and how to engage with strangers in public, and knowing proper etiquette at the dinner table. And at the dining tables. All of these things are held within the Book of the Courtier. And the fact that this was the book next to the Bible, of course, Baldassare Castiglione's portrait will be immortalized by the famous Raphael. Okay, so this brings us to our last Ninja Turtle. And if you know anything about the Ninja Turtles, Michelangelo is the cowabunga dude. He's the pizza one. He's the skateboarder, the one that has fun, and so on and so forth. Raphael, if you know about the Ninja Turtles, is the grumpy, moody one. So if it were me, and I had done my research and making the Ninja Turtles be actual characters, I would have Michelangelo be the Red Ninja Turtle, because he is a moody, grumpy curmudgeon of a guy. So, yeah, we just call him Michelangelo. Michelangelo di, see, I forgot how to pronounce it. Lodovico Buonarroti Simone. Michelangelo. Mikey. His father was a government official. He grew up in an extremely wealthy, noble family. And like I said, his father was a government official who was extremely disappointed that Michelangelo wanted to be an artist. And he had hoped that he'd grow up to follow in his father's footsteps, but obviously he doesn't, because he's one of the most famous artists of all time. Now, the thing is, even though he was raised or grew up, I guess, was born to a wealthy, noble family, he was raised by a nursemaid, or, the maid there, whose husband was a stonemason, just a general day laborer. And Michelangelo became extremely fascinated by laying stone and the general trade of stonework and masonry. And this is what he desired to be. He wanted to be a working man. He wanted to work with this material, which his father and society was, basically he was below his station of life in society. And this was not something that his family supported, so he was on his own. He was a paid apprentice, right? And he studied sculpture for a little while, but then it wasn't until he was supported and financed by the Medici that took him in and gave him a humanist education. Michelangelo was able to study philosophy of ancient Greece. He was able to study art. And he eventually settled in Rome. So, he is he's following his dream, where he's studying to be a great artist and a great man of the humanist era movement, despite what his family and his father thinks about him. And his first major work was the Pieta, the Pity, which was commissioned by the French Cardinal Jean de Bellerès. I'll show you that in a moment. And we're going to take a look at David when he returns to Florence as well. So this is the Pieta. This is the Pity. It's probably this is his first sculpture work ever. And if this is my first sculpture work, I mean, this is amazing out of marble. So again, this was commissioned by a French cardinal. It was made as a funeral monument. And these were more common in France and Germany than in Italy, these funeral monuments. But nevertheless, this is what we look at, and this is what we're looking at. But if you look at it, it's not right. It's very strange. Look at the Virgin Mary. She is huge. She is at least double the size in a lot of ways than Jesus's dead body. Why? Well, I think what Michelangelo is trying to do here is, well, a few things. One is, when this biblical event would have happened, she would have been around 60 or so. She would have been a smaller, frailer woman. She would not have been able to support the lifeless body of her son. So in order to make this scene aesthetically pleasing, right? Again, this is the artist's decisions over reality, right? He makes her twice the size of Jesus. It's kind of like this nod to motherhood. The fact that, like, this is her baby that died. And any parents out there, no matter how old my oldest boy gets or either of my children get, they will still always, to me, be my little boy, my little boys. So I can, as a parent, I can totally feel all of this. Another thing that's kind of odd and unsettling is that she is really portrayed as a young woman, rather than, the older woman that she would have been. That would been far more, I guess, historically or like kind of age appropriate. But why? Well, kind of this idea of divine beauty, like this divinity, and these perfect forms. So this is the only signed work that we get from Michelangelo, and as a matter of fact, the signature that he does have on this, he will come to regret this for the rest of his life, and he constantly writes on the regretting of his vanity. But here's an account from Vasari. Remember we talked about Vasari, that he wrote this book on all of the great artists and the sculptors of the time, and the book was called The Lives of the Most Famous Painters, Sculptors, and Architects. Well, this is the height of the Renaissance, where fame means everything, right? You are immortalized in a book. So this is an account from Michelangelo to Giorgio Vasari. One day, Michelangelo entered the place where it was set up, found that there were a great number of strangers from Lombardy who were praising it highly, and one of them asked one of the others who had done it, and they answered, Gobbo from Milan. And now Gobbo is this other artist from Milan. And Michelangelo stood silent, but thought it something strange that his labors should be attributed to another. And one night he shut himself in there, and having brought a little light and his chisels, carved his name upon it. So essentially, Michelangelo was kind of arrogant. He was slightly self-centered and jealous of the fact that somebody else was being attributed his artwork. Rightfully so at some level. I guess imitation is the greatest form of flattery, that kind of thing. And we'll talk about all of this when we get into modernism as well. But essentially, he sneaks in to where this is at in the middle of the night and carves his name in it. And but then he regrets it, and he will always regret it as the biggest act of vanity of his life. But I love the idea that, like, the marble is so smooth, his skin is so smooth. Look at the fabric, the folds in the fabric, the intricacies of the folds, and how realistic, even though, looking at it now, it is not realistic in any stretch of the imagination. The immense realism is still there, and it is quite spectacular to look at. Here's something that I'm sure everyone who, even if you don't know anything about art, you know this. And this is the David, right? This is from the Piazza del Signoria in Florence. So this was made for the Florence Cathedral, but it ended up in the Piazza de Signoria, which is essentially like City Hall, I guess, like a city hall, city center. And if you remember me saying that David was the mascot of Florence, right? Because it's kind of this idea of their being victorious over the warring city-states that they were having. So they kind of had adopted this idea of David and Goliath as the underdogs being victorious, of course. So David became the mascot for Florence. And we see a lot of these. We've seen Donatello, right? And we saw Verrocchio's David as well. So now we're seeing a third David. But this David is vastly different than the other ones. There is, yes, we see the sling over his shoulder, but we don't see weapons. We don't see a sword. We don't see we don't see Goliath's head. And he is not the 12 to 15-year-old David that we read about in biblical texts. He is an adult. He's not a boy anymore. And he is at the height of his athletic and physical being. Again, this is a humanist Greco-Roman style statue. He is standing in a contrapposto pose. He is completely nude, right? Showing off his physical ability. But he's not, this is not after the battle. That's another big distinction. This is prior to the battle. Everything else that we've seen of David is always after the fact, after he's slayed Goliath. But here, what Michelangelo wants to show is the humanist potential for greatness. Now, how Renaissance is that? He is contemplative. He's the thinking man's David. He is intellectual. He is athletic. He's planning his attack against the giant. He is calm. He is in a serene nature. He's extremely comfortable. He's just standing there with his weight shifted on his shoulder. He is not nervous. He's not anxious. He's not an adolescent. He's not childlike. Right? It's very serious and contemplative. And again, this is humanism. This is Renaissance. Now, this thing is, this particular marble was called the Giant. And the giant was thought to be uncarvable. And in fact, it had sat 26 years idle. Two other artists had tried to work with it, but had failed because of the particular strain of marble. But Michelangelo, wanting to be a sculptor, always wanting to be a stonemason, and he only ever thought of himself as a sculptor, which is funny because when I get to the next few slides, we're going to say, wait a minute, didn't you just say Michelangelo only wanted to be a sculptor, and that's how he thought of himself? Yes, that is true. So he was able to carve this with like a hot knife through warm butter. The immense detail. This is imposing. It's 17 feet tall. The image on the bottom right kind of gets a little blurry, but give you context to the height and the scale of this. So let's take a look at what Michelangelo thought was going to be his greatest work of all time. He thought that this was going to be the work that would stand the test of time and write his name into the annals of history for all time. This particular Moses from the tomb of Pope Julius II, it was, of course, was commissioned by then Pope Julius II, of course. He commissioned it as soon as he took over Rome, which was in shambles, by the way. Remember, Pope Julius II was trying, and Leo X, but Julius II was trying to reestablish Rome as the old Roman empires of old. So he commissioned a tomb. However, he ran out of money. And the project got canceled. However, Michelangelo had spent all of the time and he thought that this was going to be the greatest masterpiece of all time, and he was pissed that Julius II took it away from him because he ran out of money. He had 40 different figures depicting scenes from the Bible, and if you can see some of these drawings here are showing what this thing would have looked like when it would have been complete. But Uh, he ran out of money. The Vatican ran out of money, so he was able to finish a much lesser version of this. I guess tomb entrance. It's just still massively impressive, but not to Michelangelo standards, apparently. But this is interesting, though. Look at Moses. Remember that when we looked at the early Renaissance, we looked at the horned Mosai. It's just a nice nod and keep a nice reference to the Old Testament Mosai and that mistranslation. So, in order to kind of soothe the rift between the Vatican and Michelangelo, Pope Julius II offered him a consolation prize and said, well, I know that we ran out of money and we can't do the stone sculpture. However, I have this new building that I would like you to decorate. And out of, kind of obligation, Michelangelo said yes. And Pope Julius II said, great, I have this new church that has a barrel vault that I would like you to paint, and it's called the Sistine Chapel. So just kind of some facts about the Sistine Chapel, because we all are familiar with this work. There are 300 figures depicted in this entire painting. They are the 9 episodes from the book of Genesis. They're within 5,800 square feet. Now, this is 70 feet off of the floor, so 70 feet high. Again, the 9 episodes, chapters, events within the book of Genesis. They show the 7 prophets of Israel. He has 5 the Sibyls. Again, remember the Sibyls from ancient Greek, or kind of like this early Christian art. Sibyls were the ones who foretold the coming of Christ. We have multiple what are called ignudi. Ignudi are male nude figures, and we're going to start to see a lot more, again, male nude figures, because this is the height of perfectionism. And he, some of the things that he had to compensate for the distance that people, this is 70 feet in the air, he had to compensate size-wise as well for the people who are looking up at these from the floor. So he had to make the figures get larger as the barrel vaults moved down towards the altar. And noted that this is all fresco work. This is all pigment and wet plaster. It was extremely difficult. It took him 4 years of his life to do this. This is the entire flood story through the creation, or the creation story through the flood story. And the thing that you all need to know about this is he absolutely did not want to do this. He did not want to have anything to do with the Sistine Chapel. He hated it. Absolutely hated it. So you can Google this as well. This is the Sistine Chapel. Here is what is going on in each one of the little spaces within here, the different stories. So, this is awesome. We know that he didn't want to do this. We have writings about this. So this is funny. I'm just going to read this out loud. This is to one of his friends, Giovanni da Pistoia. He, when the author was painting the vault of the Sistine Chapel in 1509, this is from Michelangelo. I've already grown a goiter from this torture, hunched up here like a cat. My stomach squashed under my chin, my beard's pointed at heaven, my brain's crushed in a casket, my breast twists like a harpy's. My brush, above me all the time, dribbles paint on my face, makes a fine floor for droppings. Oh, dribbles paint so my face makes a flying floor for droppings. Sorry, I read that one wrong. My haunches are grinding into my guts. My poor ass strains to work as a counterweight. Every gesture I make is blind and aimless. Because I'm stuck like this, my thoughts care crazy, perfidious tripe. Anyone shoots badly through a crooked blowpipe. My painting is dead. Defend it for me, Giovanni. Protect my honor. I am not in the right place. I am not a painter. I love that. Michelangelo is in the specialized, like, I just had a brain fart. Scaffolding. Wow. Sorry, guys. In these special scaffoldings and scaffolds to lift him up above 70 feet above the ground. And he's just complaining. He's like, I've got a goiter from this torture. God, I'm stuck up here like a damn cat. I'm hurt. My stomach squished underneath my chin. I'm upside down. My ass hurts. Like, it's just, this sucks. My painting is dead. Please defend me. Please make sure that nobody just judges me because I am not a painter. I am a sculptor. I am in the wrong place. He's just pissing and moaning, and it is hilarious. And yet, little does he know that this is probably one of the most famous works of art in the world. Some of the things that he's doing in some of the details here, they glorify the human body. This is where we start to see Michelangelo. If you see muscular buff dudes, almost always it's going to be Michelangelo. That's just kind of the way he is. But nobody had done this really at the time. He's glorifying he's glorifying the human body, and he saw himself as a sculptor. So he's painting the figures like he would sculpt them. And this is the moment where God, the creation of Adam, right, where God bestows the gift of the spark of life. Before this, Adam, it was unknowing, he was ignorant, all of the things, right? We didn't have a divine purpose. And the way he's moving his finger towards Adam, the almost touch, it has this sense of importance and anxiousness, not anxiety, but like it's like the moment when you hear thunder and you know you're going to see lightning, or you see lightning and you know you're going to hear thunder. It's that impending, the impending action that's going to happen. On the left and on the right, the left is what we see prior to having it being restored. A lot of these efforts to have these frescoes and paintings be restored are controversial at best. You're never going to please everybody. But on the right is kind of the best image I have of some of the restoration work. But look at the colors and the pigments that he's using. Right, they're so very vibrant, and the translucence and the transparency of the skirts and of these thin fabrics and meshes and silks. It is quite astounding, the level of and the amount of detail that he's able to capture. This is all painted. These are all painted things. Right, here's the scene of the fall of man. But we see Adam, again, we're glorifying the human body. We see these, ouch, sorry, hit the dog. But we see these, the ignudi, right? Again, male nudes. But it's also women who are glorified and shows this muscular kind of structure. It's not just for men. It is glorifying the human body altogether. And this is the Last Judgment. This is on the wall behind the pulpit. Here you can see this would be where an altarpiece would be, but this is the entire wall of the Last Judgment. Okay, so let's take a look quickly at some Bramante architecture. So this is the Tempietto, or the Little Temple in Italy. This is the grave of Saint Peter. It's a central planned model. It's very classical, very Roman, based off of the Pantheon. And it was, although it's a circular form intended for a circular courtyard, right? This idea of the rotunda. And this is the Pantheon here. Of course, it was made for a round courtyard, but of course, the world grew up around it. So this is what we got. But why I'm showing you this is because I remember the last chapter we were looking at Renaissance architecture, and we were looking at people like Alberti, where they are flat facades. It's very flat and it's very clean and organized. The colonnades and the arcades, all of these things have a very rational order to them. But it's all about flatness, right? The facade and the pediments. These are not that way. This is very much using the space where we can have along the balustrades here and the balustrades up here, the play of light and shadow as light comes through, the way that these are scalloped, these niches are scalloped out. So this is very much a new way of doing like this three-dimensional layering for architecture, right? And so when Bramante moved from Milan to Rome, he obviously studied Roman architecture, but caught the attention of Pope Julius II, and he wanted Bramante to, and now this is prior to Michelangelo, or kind of a little bit before Michelangelo. They were contemporaries, but this was before Michelangelo kind of hit the scene, right? So Bramante was tasked by Pope Julius II to replace the old St. Peter's Basilica. St. Peter's was the original home of the Pope, probably from, I don't know, like the fourth century, right? So he liked this and wanted this to be moved into St. Peter's Basilica. And this was the plan on the left that Bramante made for the St. Peter's Basilica. And it was approved, and it started going into production. And as a matter of fact, it was immortalized and turned into a commemorative medal, which is what we look at here. And this is the design. It's very much kind of like reminiscent of like Constantinople and some of these early Romanesque, but it's definitely got these ancient Greek and Roman features. Again, looking very specifically at the Tempietto, this is what we see. Okay, but then Bramante dies. Bummer. So, guess who gets called in to finish the job? Well, Michelangelo, because he just got done with the Sistine Chapel, and he is a sculptor. He's an architect, so he gets called in to finish this job. And he goes through and simplifies some of Bramante's work, where Bramante has it's still a central planned idea, a central planned layout, meaning there's a central plan and everything is designed spread out from that central circle. Although he keeps the overall feel of the design, he designs it to be more akin to the Pantheon, and he takes away these what are called nested domes. These are domes within domes. This is where that whole like Constantinople and the Turkish Empire kind of influence comes in. But he removes those nested domes and opens it up to only having a few domes. But still, this design actually never came to fruition either, because, quite frankly, the Vatican and some of the cardinals and the church higher-ups decided that this was very pagan-esque, too pagan-esque, actually, and they would like to have the church design be more of a crucifix form, or again, that cross form that we've looked at already. And that is... we're going to see that when we start looking at more cathedrals, this crucifixed form as well. Okay, so let's take a look. I want to give you a little bit of an introduction to Mannerism, because Mannerism is starting to happen. Okay, so here is the Laurentian Library in Florence. Michelangelo is playing here. This is an extremely odd building, an odd room. So I guess let me start with saying that Mannerism is kind of this extreme artist vision above all else, or it's taking the artist vision above all else to the next step. Right? And we're going to see different types of mannerisms come out of Spain, and like techniques and styles, but definitely artist vision above all else is what Mannerism is about. Again, this is for the Laurentian Library in Florence. It was commissioned by the Medici family again, and this adjoins the Church of the San Lorenzo. But it is extremely odd in the fact that it breaks form from any of the traditional Renaissance or any of the other type of contemporary architecture that we see, with this idea of perfect forms and flat facades. Now we see almost a stark rejection of these perfect forms and flat facades, because now we see pediments that are not the same. We have a triangular pediment and an arched pediment here. We see engaged columns. Engaged columns are just columns that are that have no function. They are split in half and stuck within a wall. They don't serve as a load-bearing column. They are just purely aesthetic. We also have a broken pediment here with these lines here, and the middle of the pediment completely broken. But that's not really the thing that makes this room interesting. This is the first instance that we see rounded steps. This breaking of a traditional line of steps or flat steps. We see these ovular kind of tongue-esque steps that breach the line here, and that is just not what you do. That is not how stairs were made. And this is the first kind of instance of breaking of that form and almost a rejection. What is the opposite of a straight line? A curved line, right? So it's like almost a straight rejection of any other contemporary type of architectural forms. Okay, so let's take a look at, in order to understand Mannerism, we're going to have to go north a little bit. We're going to go into Venice. We're going to take a look at some Venetian artists. And Venice is, we were down in Rome. Oh, where's my cursor? Here we go. We are in Florence and Rome here. Okay, kind of this area. Perugia, Siena, Urbino. Now we're coming up to Venice. And Venice is an extremely important city. It's extremely connected. It's extremely wealthy. It's extremely luxurious. And it is a central trading hub of imported goods, because really this is the halfway point between Europe and Asia. And if you look on the right, I have why Venice is such an important thing. These are the writings of Marco Polo. They tell us, as he tells us as he travels to China along the Silk Road. But it goes right through Venice. So it's an extremely important city. It's very wealthy, again, luxurious, and it is full of art. And this is reflected in the art that we're going to see. Venice is one of the first. Again, oil paints are extremely expensive and new, but Venice is one of the first places to adopt the heavy use of oil paints. Let's take a look at a couple things right off the bat. This is one of the first. The other part of that. Remember, we looked at disegno. Disegno was this physical manifestation of an intellectual concept. Well, here's our second style or school of thought that we're going to look at in Northern Europe or Northern Italy and the late Renaissance. We have this idea of colorito. Now, colorito is, yeah, it's color, but it's more than that. It's a lush color. It's a rich color. It's sensual colors. They're stimulating. It stimulates the senses. They're sensual. They're sexual. They're erotic. And I don't mean sexual or erotic, and again, in a like overtly sexual way, but they stimulate the senses. They stimulate the human part of you. It's not the intellect, right? Disegno is all about rationality, and this rational design quality that stimulates you intellectually. Well, if disegno stimulates you intellectually, then colorito stimulates you sensually. Okay. Just kind of keep that in mind, that colorito, we're going to start seeing beauty for beauty's sake. We're going to start seeing color for color's sake. We're going to start seeing different focuses. We're going to start seeing things that are well, just colorito. So this is the Madonna and the Child with saints. And you can see that it has the same types of vanishing points, but the way that the colors are so rich and so lush and so full of contrast, that's what sticks out. That's what stands out. Now, this is from Bellini, Giovanni Bellini. This is known as the Madonna's Sacra Conversazione, which is the Holy Conversation. These are, again, saints from different time frames, epochs or time frames, inhabiting the same kind of space to converse with each other, or in particular, in this case, with the audience, all right, with the viewers. Let's look at another work of colorito. This is by Giorgione del Castelfranco. We don't, he was a student of Bellini. He died young. We don't really know what this painting is about. We see a soldier. We see a woman nursing a child that's separated by a small stream. We do know that the soldier on the left was actually originally intended to be another bather, but then that Castelfranco, or we just call him Giorgione, painted over and painted this soldier. Which really tells us that he had no concept of what this painting was going to be about. He had no formal direction for this painting. That it was, again, all about artistic styles. It was all about the impression of the painting and how it made you feel. Okay, so this painting is called The Tempest. And it's interesting that the subjects that we would see as subjects, the human subjects, are actually pushed off to the side, right? Again, the soldier and the nursing mother. And the tempest, the name of the painting is, right, the storm. So seems to be the vanishing point, coming back to the tempest, back to the storm. So this could be, allegory for Eve nursing Cain after the expulsion of the garden, of course, God being the angry tempest, the storm. It could be the goddess Demeter nursing Platos, who, while the father looks on. So this could be this Greek mythology story. Could be Virgin and Christ. It could be Venus and the Cupid. There's a lot of different interpretations. We don't really know, but the thing is that it's about, and compositionally it's kind of weird because everything is pushed off to the side, and we have this kind of pseudo triangular composition to it. But this is a style of painting that we're going to kind of see as this poesia, right? It's a poetic, it's romantic, it's not meant to be read literally, but more like poetry. It's more impressionistic. It's kind of how you feel about what you think the painting is about, and how the painting stimulates you emotionally or sensually, right, through your senses. So here is another, again, we're looking at Colorido, right? We're looking at these vast or these really lush, sensual types of paintings. Here is an artist that we refer to as Titian. Now, this particular painting, Titian was a student of Giorgione, and we probably think that this painting is probably Titian and Giorgione kind of like tag teaming it, because Titian was a student of Giorgione. However, Titian becomes much more popular and much more talented and much more famous than Giorgione. But we see this is on canvas. This is oil on canvas. We don't often see this yet. We are starting to see canvas kind of take over wood as a medium to paint on. And this is a part of the reason why we get such a rich, sumptuous color. But again, these are those poesia, right? So this is not meant to be read literally, and that's why it's called a pastoral symphony. This idea that, this is an allegory for art. We have two musicians, right? We have this woman here dipping a vase of water out of the well of inspiration. So these are probably muses, right? To the musicians, this idea of a dreamlike quality, a dreamlike sumptuousness of reality and of existence. Now, sometimes these are, this might be called like an Arcadian painting. Now, why they would call them Arcadian, or these pastoral paintings, Arcadians, because Arcadia was a spot in ancient Greece that was never touched by war. It was this place of peace. It was almost the Garden of Eden, or this perfect place on earth, again, that was never touched or polluted or diluted by warfare. So kind of, this is that idea of during the Renaissance that people were looking toward ancient Greek and Roman kind of thoughts and places to be something to strive for. And we see the shepherd in the background, the farm, this sfumato, this smoky softness to it, atmospheric perspective, right? It's a very luxurious painting. It's a very dramatic painting. It has a lot of sensual qualities to it. Now, Titian, after he left Giorgione and became his, I guess, a master in his own right, he takes Colorido to the extreme. And so much so, and he's so famous that, again, he becomes the official painter of Venice after Bellini's death in 1516. This, if you just look at this, is the assumption of the Virgin. The assumption of the Virgin is the idea that the Virgin Mary assumes into heaven upon her death. And she's taken into the arms of God. But this is an extremely dramatic, overly emotional picture. This is not an intellectual picture. This is with the rich reds and the vibrant creamy yellows, the oranges. It's all very welcoming. And look at like how the top portion of it versus the bottom portion of it, where these cherubs are holding up the clouds, and a lot of colorido focuses on extreme lighting, this drastic lighting, these really sharp highlights and contrasts here and here, and the dark, really kind of over the top chiaroscuro rather, where there's really heavy darks, but bright, brilliant whites and lights. So this is colorido. This is emotion over intellect. This is the High Renaissance. This is the meeting of Bacchus and Ariadne. This is based on a Roman poem of Catullus, the meeting of Bacchus and Ariadne. If you remember Greek mythology, Ariadne is the woman who helps Theseus out of the labyrinth, right, of Minos. Of course, Minos, the Minotaur. She used a thread from her dress as a guide to help Theseus out. And of course, Theseus, being a douchebag that he is, dumps her. Even though she saved his life, he rejects her. And she becomes distraught. So Bacchus comes in and saves Ariadne with his chariot pulled by leopards. And this is all just like the rich, luscious greens and the bright blues and the reds. This is where we're seeing the reds and the blues come into play of Italy. But if we look at the time frames, 1520, 22 to 1523, when the European conquest happened, and the Spanish are bringing in all of this pigment, let's not even worry about the gold and silver, because that was a small potatoes for why the European conquest European conquest of this continent took place, because of the cochineal. We'll look at that later, but the cochineal bug and its rich reds that could be made into pigments for painting that wouldn't fade and turn to a brown, like a really rusty brown reddish color, like plant and fruit pigments that they were using in Europe at the time. So if it weren't for the Spanish enslaving all of the Mexicans into the grana cactus fields, we wouldn't have the explosion of colorido in Northern Europe like we do, and like we're looking at and witnessing. This is a painting, again, by Titian. This is the Venus of Urbino. This is another one very much like the Arnolfini wedding from Jan van Eyck, if you remember, where this is all full of iconography. And in this particular one, you can, although you aren't reading it literally, there are things that you can surmise and you can glean from this. So, let me spend a little bit of time on this. So this is either a portrait of the courtesan or celebrates the marriage of the Duke of Urbino. The Venus of Urbino. Venus is the god of love, but always we see Venus with Cupid, and we don't see Cupid in this particular image. So one questions whether it is actually Venus rather than a courtesan. A courtesan is like a prostitute. Okay, so yes, aside the fact that she's nude, this is an extremely sexual, sensual, lush painting. So much again like the Arnolfini wedding, we see a naked female on a red bed, right, holding red flowers, red roses. Again, she is in fully nude. Her left hand is covering. We will talk about that in a second. But her left hand is covering her genitalia. We see a curled up sleeping dog on the bed, and then we see her handmaidens in the background with some Persian rugs. These columns here, these Roman or Greek columns here. Okay, so we could say that if this was Venus, then that maybe the dog could be Cupid. Probably not. What I would like to say is, again, this is much like the Arnolfini wedding. This is similar to a marriage contract of what to expect. So the woman, and this is also something in art history that we will look at much later in this course. It's a thing called the gaze, Gaze, and the gaze is this phenomenon that we have in art that the subject or the person in the painting is aware that the viewer is looking at them, and that is why they are looking back at you with the type of look or the type of smile, smirk that they have, playfully smirking. We see that with the Mona Lisa as well, and there's a lot of other ones, but this is definitely something that we'll look at when we talk about the gaze. So again, roses, red bed, roses, red roses, passion, love, right, lust, all of those things. Okay, so a sleeping dog. We know that in the Arnolfini wedding portrait that the dog was very much alive and standing up and his eyes were open. But here's a sleeping dog. Well, if this is in fact a picture of the wife of the Duke of Urbino, then if dogs are to mean fidelity and loyalty when they are awake, what is a sleeping dog? Maybe a blind eye to fidelity, maybe a blind eye to loyalty. Maybe loyalty isn't necessarily a part of the contract or part of the expectation. We don't know. Then in that aspect, is she covering herself up? Is she being modest with her genitalia, or is she masturbating? Because then at that point, we could look at a few different things, because this would be something that was made for a private viewing area in the house. This would not be displayed publicly, right? This would be something that only a handful of people would be able to look at or have access to. So this could be something very telling. Now, the other thing that we have, aside from red and green being complementary colors, we see, and we're going to start to see this a lot, this motif of the curtain kind of being opened, and literally the metaphor being from behind the curtain, right? Peering behind the curtain, right? The man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz reference. But it's essentially like truth is on the other side of the curtain, but actual truth is when you lift the veil, when you see behind the curtain what's really going on. So this is an interesting kind of play with that idea that we are seeing the Venus of Urbino behind the scenes. This is who she truly is. This is who she truly wants to be. This is when no one else is looking at her, when no one else is around her. This is her in her truest natural form. Right? And everything else is just kind of this facade, going back to Baldassare Castiglione and his book of the Courtier, right? When we can see that because of these dresses and the way that she's going to be prepared by her handmaidens to meet the world. So Titian is painting quite a few people. The reason why I'm showing this one is partly because I want to start introducing some women's influence here. And although although women had a very central role in society, they weren't really allowed to be painters. They weren't really allowed to be the patron of the arts. However, there are some instances where there are very famous, very powerful women who are patron of the arts that do hold real power. Although most of their power come through their husband, unfortunately, due to the patriarchy. But these are the types of things that Titian is involved in. Okay, so let's take a look at Mannerism. And we've looked at Mannerism, really the idea that it's the artist's interpretation of reality. We're changing a little bit. Now we're going to start seeing this idea of Mannerism come kind of parallel with this idea called figura serpentinata, right? Which just means a serpentine or serpentine-like figures. This is the Madonna with the long neck, and you can see that these contrapposto poses and these elongated, exaggerated forms are nowhere near human realism at all. Look at how long her body is. Look at the baby Jesus. Look how long and deformed his body and his limbs are. There's a drastic shift away from balance and symmetry and rational compositions. We are now these are the values of the High Renaissance. Now we're looking at very unusual light sources, very unusual lighting effects, these high contrast, again, using really vibrant, lush colors that are removed from reality. It is all about style over substance and elegance of the form and elegance of the subject over a realistic telling of the subject, right? These folds in her dress and in her gown, right? The way that the light captures this is all elegance and style. This is all Mannerism. This is all high late Renaissance. So the things, they don't really add up. They don't, the shapes. This is Venus, Cupid, and Folly and Time. So we're looking at Venus here. Again, Venus always comes with Cupid. Get my mouse here to work. But look at the elongated forms. But look at Cupid's back. Look at this. Like, this is not a normal position for any person to be in. This doesn't, it does not add up. They have these fantastical elements. Look at, we have a snake or a dragon-esque slithering serpentine in the back here, right? We have like masks of the humanities, of the great Greek tragedies. Old man Time up here, lifting behind the curtain, lifting behind the veil, right? This is that idea of the memento mori. The upper left here is this idea of oblivion, behind what's behind the curtain, what's after the curtain, right? And then the old woman here is jealousy, jealous of the divine beauty. We'll look at some other paintings later on that will kind of focus on the idea of time and the idea of beauty and so on and so forth, and like I guess the idea that it is not doesn't last forever, right? Yes, the memento mori, but it's so much more than just our understanding of mortality. Women, uh, in again in the Renaissance and in the history of the world, right? Are never really given their fair shake. They were never able to hold positions of legitimate power. Most women weren't allowed to be artists. There were a handful, but most of the women that were able to be successful artists, had to have been born into privilege, and into power, right? Into nobility. Nope. Sophonisba, um, she was trained from her family to be a musician, actually, and her position in society was going to be that of an entertainer. But then through painting, and if you remember Vasari, again, Vasari's book on famous painters, architects, sculptors, painters, and architects, they mentioned Vasari and Michelangelo both praise Sophonisba's talent in those works, and she becomes a woman who transcends the ability to of her station to become a very well-known, popular artist. Matter of fact, she becomes the court painter for Philip II of Spain, and we're going to see Spanish Mannerism absolutely take off. And we can look at here, this is very subtle, but it's still there. Elongated faces. The proportions aren't quite right. The bodies are a little bit small for the heads. And it's a very unnatural way of sitting. They're twisted just a little bit in ways that would be very uncomfortable and very unnatural. But we're going to take a look at Spanish Mannerism in the coming chapters that are really going to go in a wildly different direction. So here is a painting by a guy by the name of Tintoretto. This is the Last Supper. This is a painting that we've seen before, but not like this. This is an interesting take on Da Vinci's Last Supper. Well, or just the Last Supper in general, not Da Vinci's like he's copying or pulling inspiration from, but this is vastly different than if you recall and can recall Da Vinci's Last Supper, where it's very flat and everybody's on the one side of the table. Oh damn, everybody's on one side of the table here too. Dag nabbit. Very unnatural poses. Why? But look at what else what's going on in here. We have this linear perspective, but the vanishing point is off the canvas. It is not focused on Jesus here, right? It's focused off and off the page, off the painting. We see this really dark sfumato, again, this smoky, hazy quality to it that's very has a dreamlike quality to it. The harsh lighting, the glows of the halos are different. And in my art appreciation class, we talk about these. These are known, or what are known as, the divine circles. Divine circles are the halos that come around and people's heads in particular. But I love the fact that like these aren't halos per se, as just their heads are glowing. Jesus has a halo, and you can see the sun rays, but he's also the sun god. So, but I love the fact that they're all just like the apostles are glowing. And I'm looking at this painting. This is skipping way, way ahead, but I wanted to show you this because this is how my brain operates. And looking at this, the contrast, the dark, the values, the lights to dark, how dramatic it is, how smoky and hazy and kind of funky it is. I can't help but think that Vincent van Gogh saw this and had inspiration from Tintoretto when he was painting his Potato Eaters from 1885. Now, although I will say completely different, of course, but there's definitely some distinct qualities. The harshness of lights, the way the light is coming from a single source, right? The high contrast, that smoky kind of veneer to it. I just can't help but see correlations here. Although, again, this is moving ahead some 300 years, but, I don't know. I see things that way. So, Veronese, we are going to look at this one. This is the Christ in the House of the Levi. This is also a piece that we've seen before. This is the Last Supper. But interestingly, about this particular piece, it was originally the Last Supper, but it is not simply Christ and his apostles. It is populated with all sorts of strangers and dogs and dwarfs and people of African descent, Arabs. There are people that biblically should not be in this story. And this was seen as blasphemous, so much so that Veronese was taken, he was arrested and taken in front of the Inquisition and put on trial. And Veronese was like, whoa, I didn't mean any of that. This is not my intention. So instead of keeping it as the Last Supper, he changed the title to Christ in the House of Levi. And this seemed to kind of soothe some things, but this was an extremely controversial piece, and he almost lost his life in the Inquisition due to painting this. But again, having the linear perspective, the atmospheric perspective that we're seeing in this painting, where all of these orthogonals go down to a vanishing point around Christ. This is not, of course, copying Da Vinci's, but very similar in the aspect that, he is showing the Last Supper in these kind of triangular forms. He's moving all has the vanishing point right to Christ. So on and so forth. But yeah, so this is what is going on. This is all Colorido. This is all Venetian art, okay? This is stimulating the senses. I hope now that we see these sensual paintings, the fabric, the romantic aspect of the atmospheric perspective, all of these things, this is what I mean by sensual. Stimulates the sensuality of humanity. And then let's take a quick gander in an abrupt face and go back to architecture. Let's take a look at Andrea Palladio, Palladian architecture. It's this return to elegance, to the return to the perfect form. This is the Villa Rotunda. This was made for a retired priest or retired cardinal, and a retirement home, so to speak. The 40 acres on the farm. But this was done in a very central plan. Again, outline. It was based off the classical architecture of, you guessed it, the Pantheon, yet again, with, again, a central plan style with a central rotunda with porches on all four sides. If you look at here, Pantheon. right? And then here is the Villa Rotonda. So we still see these pediments, right, with these keys. These columns, now these are Corinthian columns, where these are Ionic columns, slightly different. But this is a central plan, again, central plan with the building emanating outward and 4 staircases on either side. Elegance, perfection, circling the square, right? Palladio. All right, and then I believe this is the last slide I have. Yes, this is Romano, and I just want to show you this because this is the height of late Renaissance Manneristic architecture. This is where it is all artistic choice over reality or over function. Look at the columns. All of the columns are engaged. The fact that we have broken pediments and these keystones are kind of in and out. This is no longer the flat facade, the clean lines of the Renaissance. This has undulation. This has depth to it. This is all play. This is all just art for art's sake. These are columns that don't hold anything up. There is a pediment that goes all the way across that doesn't need anything holding it up because it's engaged within the wall. The windows aren't even like see-through, right? This is all just, again, this is just play. This is just architecture for architectural sake. And that is where I'm going to leave you currently in Venice. Take a look around, listen to the music, see the sights, and enjoy your time in Venice. And when I come back with you, we will look at the high Renaissance and Mannerism in Northern Europe, and we'll move into Spain, and we'll take a look at some more of this concept of the figurous serpentinata, all right, the serpent-like figures.